It's always funny to me. I find this trope of Jesus never said X as like people think it's like a way to trip you up or stump you
Got
or
you
stop
now.
the conversation. Yeah, I got you now. It doesn't work.
No, it does not work, friends.
Jesus never talked about student loans, and yet I'm pretty sure Joe Scarborough is all about student loan transfer. So, I mean, do we turn that logic around and just say like, well, I guess anything Jesus didn't talk about, Jesus never talked about racist highways, that the Department of Transportation is now dealing with. So I guess we can't deal with racist highway.
Did Jesus even talk about racism?
Hi, welcome to Wild and Beautiful. We're Joanna Hyatt and Lauren Enriquez, your co-hosts who every week are helping you live out your faith in a way that's biblically rooted but culturally relevant.
So last week, you had a dog get skunked. This week, I had a child who, for his birthday, didn't want a party or a trip, because usually we'll like go to the beach for a weekend or they can have a party. He wanted a rabbit originally. And then we went to Petco and we chatted with them, and we were advised like rabbits are not the best kid
Are
pet.
they mean? I feel like
they're not as like
mean.
It depends on the rabbit, it sounds like. But they're not as there's not like much you can hold them.
That's it.
But other than that, there's not much to do with them. So they said, we advise guinea pigs. They're like low maintenance. They'll run around. You can kind of like, I don't know, just interact with them a little more, I guess, than with a rabbit. So
you got a guinea pig?
We got 2 guinea pigs today. We got 2. We were also advised, we didn't end up buying them at Petco. We just went and absorbed all the knowledge at Petco and then went to like the animal adoption place down the street. Yeah, but we got a pair. Yeah.
Well, you better hope
did
you get a boy and a girl so that you can, is this like a new business?
No.
You're going to now have guinea pig babies for sale?
We got a same-sex couple, Marshmallow and S'more. And we picked, they had three bonded pairs.
Oh,
this is
cute.
what they call them. Yeah, it was cute. And I said, okay, what are the options? And they're like, we have this really, really young one that's super feisty. And then we have this one that's also young. And then we have these 2 old men. And I was like, we will take the old men.
Super feisty to me reads problematic. Yeah. Slash is going to bite your
just
child
maybe
at
not,
some point.
Yeah, like maybe if you have teenagers, get a feisty guinea pig. But I have like my youngest is 3, so we don't need a feisty guinea pig. We have feisty humans.
I guess you're going to find out in like 3 or 4 months if you actually did get 2 male guinea pigs or not, and you'll have a great biology lesson for your kids.
Yes. Because our friend Joanna Allison told me and Joanna that guinea pig gestation is really short. So you can,
she thought it was 7 days,
pigs,
so we did have to Google and correct that. But I get it.
Well, you thought skunks could be smelled from 1,000 miles away too. So apparently our animal facts are just
we're really
lacking
good
in
when
the
it comes
show.
to babies in the womb. We got all those facts down.
Yes.
Animals,
all of it.
Nobody cares.
All of it.
Not here. That's not
Nobody
a priority.
cares.
It's not my concern.
Right. But so apparently it does take a little more than 7 days for a guinea pig to reproduce, but not that much more. It's like 2 months, which is just crazy to me. So if you need like a side hustle, apparently like breeding guinea pigs is the way to go.
That seems like a really odd side hustle. I mean, listen, bunnies, don't bunnies reproduce really rapidly? So
yes. And in Peru, breeding guinea pigs is actually a really good side hustle in Peru because they eat them.
Okay.
So it's a food source. So when I told Jose we were adopting guinea pigs, he was like, you're buying what?
Does he think you're going to serve it for dinner
a
at
delicacy
some point?
in Peru. I told him, I joked with him, when I leave these alone with you at home, do not
Guinea
cook them.
pigs are a delicacy in Peru. What do they taste like?
Mm-hmm. I'm assuming they taste like chicken. I've actually never had them. It's not one of the Peruvian things I've tried. I don't think it's something they eat in his region. I could be wrong. I think they call them cuy.
Okay.
Cuy. I don't know. Don't
tell your kids.
I could be wrong.
They're going to be so horrified.
Yeah. The way I learned that is when we were dating, Jose had this T-shirt from Peru that had a picture of a guinea pig on it. And we were like, oh, that's my family, before we got married and everything. That's a cute shirt. And he's like, yeah, these are cuys. We eat them. And we were like, what? And he was completely deadpan, like he was serious. We thought he was joking. And we were like, no, those are guinea pigs, like they're pets. He's like, nope, we eat them and they're delicious. I think they skewer them. I don't know.
We eat them and they're delicious.
So,
okay.
He was really proud of it. Jose is very proud of everything
as he should
Peruvian,
be.
Which
fantastic.
is adorable.
Fantastic.
Yeah. I mean, the food is amazing. We could do a whole show on.
Well, we just
our
kicked it off
South
with
American and Spanish
guinea
food.
pig roasted.
Yeah.
We can have a whole episode on
skewers.
that. Guinea pig skewers. Unreal.
There you
well,
go.
Congrats on the pet. The closest we had to a rodent. Is it a
thanks.
rodent family? We had a rat.
I think so.
We had a rat.
I have an irrational fear of rats.
I just don't know why you keep that as a pet when that is the villain in pretty much every movie.
Or it's what you feed to the villain.
Or you feed it to the villain.
Like you feed snakes, rats.
I mean, Lady and the Tramp. Who's the bad guy?
Yeah.
The rat. Right? Charlotte's Web. Who's the bad guy?
There you go.
The rat. The one time the rat got redeemed was in Ratatouille.
Ratatouille.
Oh, and
exactly.
I guess there were mice in Cinderella. But yeah, we had a rat for a couple of years, and it was basically my husband's pet. It was supposed to be the kid's pet. And they like to play that it was real heartbreaking for them when Gus passed away, but it was not. It was not. He's gone, and we are not.
Did you pet it? Like, did you hold it?
No.
Or
my husband would hold it, but when he went out of town for 4
Really?
months, and I had to feed it and clean its cage and put it back in, I put on ski gloves, and I just kind of grabbed it and threw it into the cage because it wasn't cooperating with all the snacks that I had put to try to lead it back in. So no, it's the tail, it's the claws, it's the whole thing. So I'm glad to know guinea pigs are better. And worst case, if you don't like them, you eat them.
There you go.
Problem
solved. We'll just not mention to the kids that's what's in the stir fry that night.
Perfect. Okay, moving right along. It's actually perfect because I think your son's birthday lands on the same day that I was going to mention. September 17th, this last Saturday, was Constitution Day, which is celebrating the signing of the U.S. Constitution by the 39 delegates.
This is totally a Joe topic.
It's exciting, friends.
I'm just going to mute myself. Joe, just go do your thing on the Constitution.
Here's why this matters, right? I mean, we just had an episode saying how you can't not just preserve, but you can't perpetuate something that you don't really know about. So as Christians, we perpetuate our faith by teaching our children not only about the Word of God, but the tradition of faith in which we stand in terms of, hey, guess what? You are part of a story that has been going for thousands of years. And here's the rich history that you get to learn from so that they can carry it on to the next generation. And we tell our children about the wonderful things that God has done in our own lives as part of that perpetuation so that the faith tradition continues to grow. Well, same for the United States of America and our liberties, our freedom. You know, I was referencing the speech from Lincoln, the perpetuation of political institutions, and how really you can't perpetuate this idea of what is America if you do not understand what America started out at, and not so much as history matters, but what were we intended to be? And so Constitution Day is a great chance to pull out the Constitution because, we try on July 4th and that thing is a little bit long. So I'm just going to go ahead and read you the preamble to the Constitution because it's beautiful. Y'all ready?
Do it.
We, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity, do ordain and establish this Constitution for the United States of America. If I could do a little cheering soundtrack right now, that would happen. Y'all, you wonder what America's supposed to be? This is it. Right here. Lays it out. A more perfect union. It doesn't mean a non-diverse union. It didn't mean a union that pretended it didn't have flaws. But remember, they understood even in this moment, it needs to be better, even better than what it is today as we write this Constitution.
Yeah.
Right? Establishing justice.
Yeah, and they knew that because slavery was still legal and there were people, signers, who were like, this is the first step. We're going to get there.
I was thinking too about the idea of the American dream. Part of what makes it so amazing is that it's a dream and that it's something that you are going towards. Because if we've already realized something in the past, then we don't go back to that dream. It's dreams that draw us to become better versions of ourselves. And the American dream, a more perfect union, a place where justice is established, where you have domestic tranquility, all of these things is what has for 235 years driven the people of this country imperfectly at times, but going towards this future, promoting the general welfare and securing the blessings of liberty, not only to ourselves, but to our posterity. And that is something important to remember, because we have become a people that it's very much just about ourselves. Like, what is good for us right now? And I think so much of what is happening, these flare-off kind of crazy moments, I don't know that people are really thinking, how does this fit into the bigger storyline for our children down the road? What are we doing to set up the next generation to do better? I think most would be pessimistic that the next generation is going to have it better than we have had it.
That's a really good point. I hadn't really thought about it, that we live in a generation for the first time that is choosing not to have kids because they simply don't want to. That's the reason that most people give if they've decided not to have kids. And that affects so much of how we live as a society. If we're not living in a way that we're planning to hand on the fruits of what we are doing to the next generation. Gosh, that's a really good perspective to think about how different that was for the signers when it was having an average of 42 children. Yeah, I mean, 10 of them would die in childbirth and et cetera. But yeah, just handing on the posterity to our kids. And for those who need like a dramatized representation of history in order for it to click, the movie 1776, I guess movie, was it a play originally? Then it was turned into a movie.
Which one are you talking about? The John Adams TV series? That one's really good.
The movie 1776. It's like a musical.
Great.
I don't even like musicals, but this one's really good. Really good. Just like humanized the signers, and it showed their conflicts and how they weren't even all the same faith, and they didn't all agree on slavery, and slavery was a really contentious issue for them, and how compromise, like how they recognized coming from England and having lived in the colonies as they were trying to figure out how do we coexist in a way that's peaceful and just, what they had learned up to that point, the importance of checks and balances, and just, I don't know, it was really cool to see them like almost get in fist fights in the movie. And I think that was true to life. Yes. I think that was true to what happened, that these people really duked it out and figured out a way to govern themselves knowing that they were going to have really, really serious disagreements. And it's interesting to me that despite the fact that so many of them were not, maybe they were believers, some of them weren't, but a lot of them were not avid practicing Christians. And yet the most sourced or cited text in the Constitution, I believe, is the Bible. So they understood there was some wisdom here that they were bringing into the way they were going to govern themselves. And I just think there's so much that we can learn today in our current political climate from looking at these people who were so divided and so polarized the way we are, and yet they still recognized it's worth finding a way to coexist.
Well, it probably helped that they did have, most of them at least, had the common language of the Bible, right? We don't even have a common language hardly anymore with people who may oppose us politically, because our values are not even rooted in the same things. Like, there's one group that says there are absolute values, that over time it does not change what is right and what is wrong, and that there is a standard, and that standard can be known both by law and nature, and also within ourselves, because God has written that standard on our hearts. And then you have the other side that says your truth is truth. It's everyone's own truth. And you're like, well, that right there contradicts itself. And this idea that it can be changing, and that things are constantly being rediscovered as to what is right and what is wrong. And those two ideas, they are exact opposites, and they come into clash all the time. We see it right now in the marketplace of ideas, in the culture, in economics, and anywhere you look where there's conflict, it's because it's two views about the world and the way the world works and humanity that are colliding. And our founders, even if you had people that they weren't avid, Christ followers, the Word of God was the standard for them, and their morality and their virtue and their values, which is how they understood liberty to actually be carried on, because you rooted it in Scripture. And, it's relevant. We had a reader push back at us. Why do I keep calling them a reader? Because I read their comments. They emailed. That's why. Which, by the way, if you have, they were a listener. If you have a comment or a critique, please email us at wildandbeautifulpodcast@gmail.com. We had a listener pushback, and it was a male. So yay to a guy listening. Good job. Good job. And his pushback, he had listened to the episode on student loan forgiveness. And he said, well, on the one hand, you're knocking student loan forgiveness, which, by the way, it's transfer of loans. We're just going to keep saying that. And yet you applauded student lunches. So wouldn't you say that some socialist policies are good? And then he went on to say, when we're talking about funding, consider how much money from our taxes goes to fund the military. He said something like 24%. I haven't fact checked it, but we can go find that.
It's a lot. I think it's the biggest thing in our budget. And for context, if people didn't hear that episode, we praised student lunches, not in the sense that we think the government should be in charge of feeding everybody. We praised student luncheons in the context of there are kids who only get good meals from school. Safety net programs have a place in society. And what the Biden administration is threatening to do, I think this was the context of our conversation about lunches, is that if schools do not start teaching lies about gender, the federal government is going to withdraw nutrition funding from these schools as a punishment. So they're going to punish hungry, underprivileged kids on ideological grounds. So that was the context of us supporting student lunches.
And we can quibble about how much money is being spent on an airplane? $2 billion for a fighter jet? Well, maybe we should rediscuss that. I don't know. Got to sit down and have some transparency with the military. But right here in our Constitution, we see that it says that part of the formation of this union is to provide for the common defense. That means we actually are meant to be putting our money towards the military, whether it is state or federal military. We are meant to be promoting the general welfare, which in times is going to mean helping children who are not getting a meal. Now, the reason the government is having to step in is because, guess what? Local communities are not doing it. Churches, in a big way, churches have failed. And where churches stepped out of serving the communities, the government has stepped in. And so it's not saying, socialist policies are good. First of all, socialism, the idea, is contrary to Christianity and the value that is placed on humanity and the individual. So even if you have something that is kind in the moment, the government happens to be doing it, that doesn't mean all of socialism is good. It means we, the church, actually failed to do what we should have been doing.
Yeah, the church makes this distinction, the Catholic Church. They talk about social policy, and then there's a distinction between that and socialism, which is a worldview that is at odds in every way with Christianity. And we talked a few weeks ago about something that is in the Catechism called the principle of subsidiarity, where what the church supports is for those who are in need. There is a social mandate that we do help them, but that should start as close to the individual as possible. And from there, it should go out. So first you go to your family and your friends, your neighbors, if you need help. If they can't help you, then you go to maybe your church, your local community organizations in your town. If they can't help you, the city, then the state. And as a last resort, the federal government, which ideally is providing for the things that are a federal issue, like defense of our borders and things like that. So a lot of people will try to conflate the social policy, which we are mandated as Christians, as believers, to clothe the naked and feed the poor and visit the imprisoned and all of these works of mercy. They'll try to conflate that with socialism, which I don't know I don't know the person who left feedback at all, but I think for some Christians, that's where things get blurred, is that social policy, helping those around us, social, and socialism are two different things.
And I think that's a great distinction that you're making too, because feeding hungry children in our community, whether it's the church or the state that does it, is a social policy. It's helpful. Transferring the debt of somebody who willingly chose to take on that debt is not helping. It's not a charity. It's not a kindness. Because one, it removes responsibility from an individual who should bear that responsibility. Somebody who is 18, 25, 35, they have the responsibility of paying their debts. A 6-year-old does not bear the responsibility of feeding themselves. That is their parents and the community around them. Second of all, when you transfer the debt, you don't actually deal with the root issues that are driving that problem. And so kids are getting degrees that aren't serving them well economically. So there's no reason, no motivation to get a degree or to pursue a trade where you can actually get a job. We also know a lot of that debt transfer was for people with secondary degrees.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure we can all cite somebody who has not yet wanted to enter the workforce because they're just going to go from degree to degree to degree. And some people are pursuing very good degrees, but you choose to do that. That, again, is your choice. And so transferring the debt, again, looking back at the Constitution, it does not ensure domestic tranquility. Now you're pitting people against one another, right? People are angry that they were financially responsible, or they've worked really hard to pay off debt, or they forwent going to college, and they're not having to pay for somebody else because it's a additional financial burden on the country. Neither is it securing the blessings of liberty for our posterity, because it is putting more debt. And we don't understand that concept of debt very much in the United States, because we just keep punting it down the road. Like, we hear this is going to be a problem. It will be a problem at some point.
It's the exact problem of not thinking about the fact that we have posterity.
Exactly.
That some of us are actually having children that are going to be saddled with these enormous crises that we are creating for them.
I mean, at some point, it's not sustainable. When we're seeing it with inflation, and people are like, it's not that bad. You're like, it's not that bad. Have you been to the grocery store lately?
Yeah,
it's bad.
It's bad, guys. It's really bad. I just listened to a report about mortgages, just depressing. If you're a first-time home buyer, I'm grateful we bought a house when we did, because people are getting priced out of the market who would have been able to buy a house last year. It's really sad. But just a final word on the student loan transfer thing. I mean, it wasn't some principled interpretation of Christianity that prompted President Biden and his administration to make that announcement. The reality is that we have midterm elections coming up in November. We're literally a few weeks out from a determination of whether Biden's party or his opposing party will take power at a federal level. And that was the entirety of the calculation for the administration. I'm not knocking politically motivated decisions. It's a fact of life in this country that each party is going to do things that are going to drum up their base and try to increase voter turnout. But that's what this was. And so these kind of revisionist history things that we're already seeing, where people are interpreting this as Biden and Pelosi and their friends just having more straight morals. That's just not the reality of what is going on here. This was a calculated political decision that was made when it was, how it was, with the goal of voter turnout in favor of Biden and his party.
If you want to hear more about our thoughts and also the response to some of the Christian lines about, oh, this is forgiveness, just like Jesus forgave, go listen to last week's episode. And go read the Constitution, friends. Be encouraged, be excited, make it a round off, have your kids do it. It'll be great. Rolling into our next thing, we haven't talked about abortion for a hot second on this podcast, which means probably 17 minutes. And so we wanted to do a roundup, of headlines, because there's been a few headlines in the last week or two. And one, it's to help you, the listener, just, again, know what's happening, but also know how to respond, because while the headline may be different, the underlying themes and issues at play are usually the same. And so the more you learn, the more confident you are the next time it comes up. So let's take the first one. Mr. Minnesota gubernatorial.
Oh my gosh.
Such a big word.
Gubernatorial. I know. It doesn't make any sense because there's a V in governor, but then they put a B in gubernatorial. I don't understand.
So why don't you tell that one, since your work did a great parody on it as well.
I think his name is Scott Jensen. I'm not looking at the headline, but this guy is running as the GOP candidate in Minnesota. And from what I understand, he has in the past expressed pro-life beliefs. But as so many politicians are doing right now, and this is not a good political strategy. It is not aligned with polling that the American sentiment toward abortion, but they're deciding that saying that reversing Roe v. Wade was extreme and introducing abortion bans that will only ban a small percentage of abortions. GOP candidates in certain states have decided that it's a good strategy to distance themselves from this. So what this guy, Scott Jensen, did in Minnesota is he ran an ad holding his newborn granddaughter. I mean, this little baby, she must have been maybe 2 weeks old. I don't know. You saw the video. Like this is a brand new baby. He's holding her. It's a 30-second ad where he says, abortion is a contentious issue. As the governor, I can't do anything about it, which isn't entirely true, but we'll just leave that aside and assume that it's true. And instead of dealing with contentious issues like abortion, I'm going to focus my gubernatorial term on things that matter. Quote, I'm going to fight for things that matter. While he's holding his granddaughter, dismissing the entire fight to protect babies like her. It just was completely tone deaf. So what we did at Students for Life is we had somebody hold a puppy and deliver the exact same script that he did, but we replaced baby or abortion with puppy killing. And it doesn't resonate well with puppies. So yeah, just bad strategy. There's another guy, this isn't in our roundup, but there's another guy who's running as a GOP candidate in Colorado who thinks that reversing Roe v. Wade was too extreme. He thinks that a 15-week ban on abortion is too extreme. And this is your pro-life option in Colorado. So I don't know exactly which babies he does want to protect or which babies Scott Jensen wants to protect, but these babies in these states are
presumably
in danger,
the ones that they're holding. That's it. That baby.
I hope so.
But that rolls into the next headline, which is that Senator Graham has introduced a 15-week ban, which if you first hear that, you don't know what it's talking about. You think, does that mean we're now reinstating abortion up until 15 weeks? No, it would be creating this standard of up to 15 weeks across the country and no more, because there are certain states that have no limit on abortion. Literally. New Mexico, Colorado, Maryland,
New York, Illinois, Maryland,
Washington. Technically, it's up until viability, but they waffle on that. So you've got these states where children are being killed at 38, 39 weeks. Don't tell me it's not true, because I have gone undercover into those very abortion facilities. And I have heard from the abortionists that, yes, absolutely, if that needs to happen, we can end the pregnancy. We will terminate that for a cool $15,000.
And there's a documentary.
But
easily 15, 20,000. There's a documentary called After Tiller. If you don't believe the pro-life undercover stuff, like what the courageous Joanna did, After Tiller was made by the abortion lobby. And in it, late-term abortionists are literally on camera saying like, oh yeah, today the appointment was a 34-week, or it's happening on a daily basis in this country, late term. So a 15-week ban, though, most of the abortions in the country happen prior to 15 weeks. So they're in the first trimester. At least half of them are actually with chemical abortion pills. And then the other half are surgical. And so about 95% of the abortions in the country are being committed prior to 15 weeks. Now, yes, they're happening up to 9 months, and there's thousands of them happening up to 9 months because we have about 1 million abortions in this country every year. But in Europe, like the standard is abortion is only legal through the first trimester. So when Senator Graham introduces this idea that maybe we should cap what states can do at 15 weeks, really that's bringing us in line with like the developed world. It's not anything extreme. Actually, what's extreme is that any child can be killed in abortion in the United States.
For any reason. Yeah, and the truth is, we don't like hearing about these late-term abortions. My congresswoman had a town hall. She's one of the brave souls that has a town hall. Never mind that my senator has yet to hold an in-person. But anyway, and there were some people there who oppose her and who they were yelling, partial birth abortion, late-term abortion doesn't happen in this country. It's like, yes, it does. And in fact, the House voted and passed, against the Republican vote, the Democrats voted and passed to try to codify Roe v. Wade through all 9 months, to try to make it okay to kill the child through all 9 months. And they put in there the very loosey translation, except for cases of health and well-being of the mother. Well, we know that gets abused all over the place. And so what Senator Graham's trying to do does reel it back. But do you think it poses the risk of people saying, okay, great. If we get a 15-week, then we're good. Like that's our compromise. We don't have to try to keep fighting to abolish abortion.
I think that's always been a problem for us before Roe, after Roe. Education is a huge challenge for us. And I think that's like our main priority now that Roe is reversed and we now have the freedom to start making better protections on the state level. But we know that when we do polling and you do it in such a way where you're educating and polling at the same time. So you'll say something like a heartbeat can be detected at 5 weeks gestation. Do you think that abortion should be illegal after the heartbeat can be detected? You'll get a much different response than if you just say, do you think abortion should be banned at heartbeat? Because people don't know like when the development milestones are and things like that. So the education piece is so important because you just see time and again, no matter who's doing the polling or how they're asking the question, when people know about abortion, they reject abortion. And so, I think, it's probably going to pose a problem. And 95% of that is because the mainstream media is going to take anything that the pro-lifers do and turn it into a narrative that the sky is falling. They're not going to tell you that 95% of abortions are happening prior to that cutoff. Because if people knew that, I don't think anyone would bat an eye at us coming in line with what's going on in Europe and banning abortion at 15 weeks. In fact, the polling does support banning abortion at heartbeat. People support banning abortion after the first trimester much earlier than what politicians on both sides seem to be aware that the American people support. So I don't have an easy answer for that one. Just keep educating people. Share like the educational memes, have those conversations, because when people know what it is, then they really come closer to our side.
And again, asking questions can be a great way to help people think through what they actually believe. Like, okay, when do you think would be a good time in a pregnancy to legalize it? And why? Well, why that week and not this week? Why? Because the reality is like a child is developing, yes, from the moment it is conceived until it hits about 25 years old. Your prefrontal cortex is not fully developed until you're in your mid-20s. So things like, well, it's not fully developed. Well, neither is my 2-year-old. Well, it can't survive on its own. Well, neither can some teenagers, right? Like there's just these qualifiers don't work because if the value is either innate in the being or it's not there. And so
that's why they don't agree on any goalposts. The other side cannot come to a consensus on when abortion should or shouldn't be legal.
The irony is
it's so different for every abortion
only
supporter.
Lasted 35 weeks, they would think 35 weeks is the limit. It's just right. And even when you count the 38 weeks, 40 weeks, well, we all know that includes 2 weeks where you're not actually even pregnant, friends. And so it's good to also point back, like push back a little bit that the extreme position is the one that okays killing children. The extreme position is the one that doesn't want to find a solution for all the reasons a woman might consider an abortion. That's extreme. Not us. Not us seeking to save the child and the woman. We're not extreme. And again, words matter. And so just remind them, like, tell me what extreme means. Outside of ordinary, outside of the mainstream, outside of what is commonly held as a belief. Guess what? You're extreme. Last headline is this one MSNBC host, Joe Scarborough. We're like, okay. He talks about how Jesus never spoke about abortion and therefore being pro-life is heresy. Now, I think you and I have seen variations of this lately of like, well, Jesus didn't talk about abortion. Or Jesus is pro-choice in that he's for you making a decision yourself because of free will. And therefore, Jesus is pro-abortion. I'm like, y'all missed your logic class and your theology class. Congrats. But what Joe was saying here is he throws out the card. Listen, I'm a Southern Baptist who grew up reading the Bible. He does acknowledge he's a backslidden Baptist. So at least he was willing to give.
Apparently he forgot.
He's like, but I still know the Bible.
Meantime.
Jesus never once talked about abortion. I'm like, okay, agreed. He never once talked about abortion as Jesus in the New Testament. But it's forgetting that Jesus, as he has said before, is part of the Godhead. So he was there in the beginning when all creation was made, which means he was there. And when it says, children are a blessing in the Old Testament, when children were to be protected, because he says it in John 8, he says, before Abraham was, I am. Who else talks about I am? When God is meeting with Moses too, right? I am that I am.
Yep.
And so we know that though Jesus didn't have the red letters in the Old Testament, the truth still stands. And so to say that it is heresy to be pro-life, I'm like, no. Again, it's like the Princess Bride. You keep using that word, but I don't think you know what it means.
I don't think you know what it means. It's always funny to me. I find this trope of Jesus never said X as like people think it's like a way to trip you up or stump you or stop the conversation. Yeah, I got you now. It doesn't work.
No, it does not work, friends.
Jesus never talked about student loans, and yet I'm pretty sure Joe Scarborough is all about student loan transfer. So, I mean, do we turn that logic around and just say like, well, I guess anything Jesus didn't talk about, Jesus never talked about racist highways, that the Department of Transportation is now dealing with. So I guess we can't deal with racist highways.
Did Jesus even talk about racism?
Yeah.
I'm going to have to...
Debatable how
I'm
you
going to
would
have to look, but I'm
that.
like, it was Paul who said there is neither slave nor free,
There's neither
Jew nor Gentile, Scythian.
Exactly.
He's the one who pointed that out.
I mean, he told the parable of the Good Samaritan. I could see an argument for that being a commentary
but Jesus
on
didn't
racism.
Say Black Lives Matter.
Yeah.
So what are we supposed to say there?
So yeah, I guess we can't do Black Lives Matter since Jesus didn't say it. It's just not. It's not from where we're supposed to be arguing.
No,
as
and
Christians.
it's actually such a lazy and stunted way of reasoning, because to look at scripture, you say like, but that doesn't even make sense. You would say Jesus didn't say Black Lives Matter, but we know that Jesus absolutely believes that the lives of Black people matter, just as he believes that the lives of children in the womb matter. Why? Because he understands that all of those people were made in the image of God, and we know that. Why? Because of the whole of scripture. Like, it's just like
they matter because he is the God
who created them. And so it's really hard to say, but we have to care about people of different races. Yes, but not about children in the womb. What? Like, I'm with you at the front, and then you lost me on the second point. And the reality is, if you don't get the abortion issue right, and there's a right, it's not nuanced. It's not. It's nuanced not. Why people get abortions. It's not nuanced what abortion is and whether it is right or wrong.
Yes.
If you don't get that right, all of your other positions and reasoning is tainted because you haven't stood in the bravest and most accurate position to then have a correct perspective for all of humanity. It's really hard to say this life mattered, this life matters, this life, but not at this certain point where every life then is therefore at risk. Because then actually the immigrant life doesn't matter. The refugee life doesn't matter. The life of the minority, the disabled does not matter, because in the womb, you're saying all bets are off and anything can be done to that child.
Yeah. Yeah. The God foundation that we're standing on from scripture is that every human being matters because they're made in the image of God. If you take that foundation out, you don't have anything to stand on when you're making an argument about immigration, racism, poverty, hunger, social issues, none of it. You can't just selectively pick out abortion and want the rest and not want abortion, because they're all standing on that same foundation. So good try, Joe. Better luck next time. But no, that didn't work out for you so well.
Go back and read all of it.
Stop talking and just read the Bible.
All right, friends. Well, that is it for this week. Thank you so much for listening in. And we hope that today encouraged you. We hope that today helped you to be able to go into this next week being just a little bit braver, a little bit more wild, but also a little bit more beautiful in the way that you engage people on your faith. See you next week.